We've been talking about hip shoulder separation and kinetic sequencing. These are terms that have been kind of been put out there already in this video a lot. And I just kind of want to show some similarities between different sports and volleyball and how this kinetic chain kind of results in exactly what is hip shoulder separation. So I'm actually going to look at a baseball hitter here first. So we're going to look at the hitter, the guy at bat here. So we're first going to let it just run play here. Massive home run out of the stadium. Great hit. But let's look exactly at the hip shoulder separation, what we're talking about here. So when we talk about hip shoulder separation, we're talking about hips closing off in one direction and then being able to generate force by a closed hip or a loaded hip, and then the shoulders follow in an opposing torquing fashion. So we're using our ab muscles and our hips to accelerate our upper body, and those are separated by a strengthening, stretching, shortening cycle. So we're really stretching that hip and shoulder in opposite polar directions, and that's creating a lot of power, and it's also creating a lot of torque in our abs and into our obliques, and then translating that into our shoulders. So a little bit of this, why so many athletes do this is because it works naturally with the spine, and it also allows the head to be neutral and relaxed. So that head, neutral and relaxed head, is going to allow proper vision, proper aiming, and proper alignment of force going forward in the direction that you want to push that force going forward. So if your head's tilted to the left or the right, or it's falling, then your body kind of falls and follows that spine along with it. So we want to have that head neutral. So first off things here is we're going to look how our batter is closed off with the hips here. So at first we follow through with the hips going forward, and you can see the arm acceleration through with the close off shoulder and the hips coming around, and we're driving straight. So the chain goes foot drive, hip drive, up into our shoulders, up into our arms, and you can even see then the arms go loose through the ball, and you can even see the bat kind of ricochet back, so you can kind of see it recoil. See that bat? So there's a whole sequencing here, and the shoulders are really stretching and open right here in this load phase. Hip, then shoulder, extension through the arms. The bat recoils at the end. Again, here, hip, shoulders. We're going to see the hips facing one direction, facing out, and coiling this. So you can really see the hips are all going forward in this one direction here. So we're stretching this up, the abs are stretching, and then our shoulders are extended along this parallel line, and we rotate open. So this is a basic hip shoulder separation. This is what we're talking about when we see this. This is at this phase, and then we kind of go through this loading phase, and then we do the acceleration, and then the hips come back. So, but you see the hip shoulder separation is that the hips are still moving forward. They're facing forward. The shoulders are sideways, but now the hips are still facing forward. They've relaxed, they've gone through that kind of transfer of energy, and now they've stopped, and now the body follows forward. See how the hips don't move anymore? You see the hips going, and then the hips don't move anymore, and then that follows, they're done. So that transfers that energy into the shoulders. So here is hip shoulder separation, here is hip shoulder contraction and acceleration. So when we talk about hip shoulder separation, this is what we're talking about in the head. You can see the head also doesn't move back and forth. So we're not going backwards, piking with our spine. Again, here's Gabby. Up here you can see the hips are facing one direction. Then when she opens up, now they're really separated. See how the hips are facing? You can really see the hips, the hip bone's going that way and the hip bone's going this way, but then the shoulders are on this parallel, or this other perpendicular line here. And then they can contract back, and now the hips are aligned back with the shoulders. So everything is going this direction. But right here you can see, there you can clearly see the hip is going one way forward and the shoulder is going one way sideways. So this is the hip shoulder separation that we're talking about. Again, in volleyball now we can see different hitters here. Right there, that's great hip shoulder separation. See how the hips are facing forward, but now the shoulders are side and now they contract forward. See how the hips realign in unison with the shoulder, the hips and the shoulders unison. So here they're separated, they're twisted, the head is still, and then we follow through. Again, right here you can see pretty good. The hips are going perfectly straight to the net and the shoulders are twisted. You can see the number 18 and now you can't. So here to here, this is what we're talking about. Just the term hip shoulder separation, this is what we're referring to. Again, right here on a jump serve, so you can see the kinetic sequencing, foot strike, arm drive, transfer of energy from the hip. Now the hip is loading up, the coiling. This is a relaxed tension. Now this is hip shoulder separation. You can see it perfectly. Here's the hips going forward. The shoulders are on a perpendicular line here. Then they straighten out. This is what is causing that chain to effortlessly and that energy to effortlessly move through the body, through the hand. Again, hip shoulders opening up. Again, one more, just to give you a look of what, when we talk about hip shoulder separation, what exactly we're talking about and what does it look like. So about right here, so the load is right here, there, that's perfect hip shoulder separation right there. Again, the hips are facing forward, the net, and you can feel the abs stretching, and the head again doesn't lean back. The head's not tilted and moving. The head is still straight and neutral. The body contorts and contracts around the spinal column, not back and forth on the spinal column, bending it or shortening it. It's rotating. Again, another volleyball hit. Here, right there, you can see again the shoulders going forward. So here, the hips and shoulders are equal. Here, the hips and shoulders are separated. Shoulders equal, shoulders separated. I'm going to look at another baseball hitter, Juan Carlos Stanton. He has a massive amount of torque that he uses here. So he's really driving those hips forward and that shoulder. First he drives again, just like volleyball, leg sequencing, leg, glutes, hips, shoulders, arm. Twist. You can see this twist all the way through. A massive amount of torque twist right here. Let's look at golf. Let's look at Tiger Woods here. So again, let's focus on that head. This is a major plus of hip shoulder separation, which you almost always have to have in golf. It's pure because if you take your eye off the ball for just 1 second, your head has to be completely still. Golf is almost an extreme hip shoulder separation sport. You can see how quiet those legs are. You can see how quiet the hip is. It's being completely relaxed. Everything is rotating around the spinal column. So here you can see how extreme golf is here. I mean, that is a massive amount of hip shoulder separation here. The shoulders are completely turned sideways. The hips are completely forward. So again, the hips are completely forward. And you can see how much he's opening on this parallel line here. You can just feel that. Just by watching the video, you can feel this tension being built up here. And the head, again, the head is very straight. The legs are very soft because he's already on the ground. He doesn't have to jump. Golf is obviously not a jumping sport, so the sequence can be a little bit manipulated. So it goes from feet steady into a nice hip transfer automatically because you're weighted down. You already have weight on the ground. So that energy can transfer quickly into that hip so it can relax. And then you're building up that tension in that hip shoulder separation, contortion of that torque. And then first you can see his hips rotating. You can see his hips open. You can still see the hips rotating first, and then the arms follow through, the abs, then the club face follows through. And look at all this twist in this back here. We're using a lot of spine. We're not using our spine to go back and forth. We're using it twisting motion to generate force. So again, let's see that in normal speed here. Tiger Woods, of course. Feet have a nice base. The weight's slowly transferring. He's building up kinetic energy. The head is still. Very quiet legs. Now he's rotating around that base hip, starting with the hip, obliques, scaps. Everything is contracting now and then relaxed again. So the energy is dissipated through the arm, and now he's pretty relaxed through his follow through, which is a process. Here he is from another angle. Here he is driving. Same thing. There's the massive amount of hip shoulder separation. There's the legs. You can really see on this drive, because the drive, he has to obviously hit it harder so the legs aren't as quiet. But you can see he's getting this into his loading phase here. Now he's really coiled up. But we start with the hip drive. This leg is going to be lowered. And we can start this process with our leg, then our hip. Everything is lined up. Our head again is straight, relaxed, and then really driven through, and really a lot of torque there. There's a massive amount of torque coming in. Nice little forward view. As you can see how the shoulders and the hips, you can see the hips right here are facing down and how closed off these shoulders are. So really a lot of force going back, loading up. Again, the head is very quiet, but then when you see him driving, you can see these hips lowering. Right about here, you can see the legs starting to fire and loading into the ball. Again, a rotational athlete, how they're getting their force generation. Again, see how quiet the legs are here with the hip is really rotating. Next we have tennis, and we have Roger Federer here serving. So these are all the top players in the business here, and I use these examples just because they're so efficient at these. You can see them so obviously how well they've practiced and trained it. So I like using these guys as examples. And you can see all the similarities between these athletes and how much sports science they've put into their bodies, how many millions of dollars they've invested in themselves with the videos and the nutrition, all these things. But what it comes down to is still rotational athletes are leg drive, energy going up the leg, into the hips, into the abs, into the shoulder separation, and then through the arms. So very similar in all aspects of each sport. And you can see how much rotation there is really here. So again, here's the toss. So the toss in tennis, we're going to go a little bit fast forward. This is a unique kind of loading phase that each tennis player has. He's kind of rotating his shoulder upward. Opposites are equal. Nice kind of trophy pose here. But now we're starting to generate some leg force here. You can see the athlete, Federer, starting to manipulate with the legs first. So driving off the ground, he's pushing off the ground into the leg, into the hip. So the hip are starting to turn quickly and the shoulder's still back open. You can see this almost looks like a volleyball spike here. Again, hips here. You can see where the shoulders start. The shoulders start there, and they rotate to back align with the hips, everything going forward. You can see everything going forward. And even this offhand here, a lot of rotational athletes, you can see their offhand, and you're going towards that offhand, so you're taking a kind of a bite out of it. It's keeping up around your waist, either your belly button or to your chest, into that head region, but you're not forcing that hand back at you. It's kind of just a relax, and you're going forward into that hand and rotating. Look how much he's rotated all the way around, rotated, but look at the head again. So similar to all sports that have rotation in them and overhead kinetics. Let's look how subtle the head is. Let's draw a circle around the head and see how he stays within that circle almost the whole time. Look at that. He stays within that circle the entire serve, his head does. As opposed to the hand, where the right hand is here, 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 here. Look at that. Look how far the hands traveled. And look how little the head's traveled. So again, the hand travels all the way around the clock, rotating around, the head barely moves around. So that's a very big beneficial part of the hip shoulder separation here. Here he is again from the back view. Again, this is Federer. Here, right here. This is a lot of torque that he's generating from here forward. And a lot of follow through too with the racket here. Just like a baseball pitcher or a football passer, quarterback, or a volleyball strike. Look at the hand and the arms lash through. Again, loading up on these legs to build some energy. The arm's in a nice solid position where it lines up smoothly within the bones of the structure. Hip shoulder again. The head is so silent. I love this. The head is so focused and so silent. Open up chest. So back, you can see on this parallel as axis here, and then you can see on this axis completely changing of momentum of rotation. Rotational athlete. Again here. All right, here's Pat Mahomes. He was the Super Bowl MVP. He plays for the Chiefs. He's a young kid. He can also throw a baseball 95 miles per hour, but he's a really good quarterback, one of the best. He's the MVP already. Here's him throwing some long balls. He's really known for his arm strength, but what happens also is his fundamentals. He was a big baseball guy too, so his dad was a professional baseball player. So these translate at a young age, and they translate from sport to sport. Again, Super Bowl MVP this last year. And you can see this back leg is generating a lot of force here now. So same mechanics. He's driving off his back leg. He's starting this loading cycle. He's opening up his hips equal. His hips are facing one way, his shoulders separated, and then it recoils, snaps back into place. Look how far that hip goes. Look at this hip direction is open, closed off and turned. Here he is again. You can see this massive step with his foot and then twist here. Again, the head, look at the head, how subtle it is. Doesn't really rotate much. This allows for accuracy, this allows for sight, this allows for control of the body from the left to the right and not turning too much and not over rotating. Here he is again. So again here. In his drop back, getting a good base, so he's set up with his base nice. Rotates forward. So quick, it snaps it fast. He's got such a quick release. You can barely even see it in real time. It's hard to even notice how quickly that release is. But those hips and shoulders snap very fast here, from here to here. Stays very tall. Look how tall he is. Good posture. Nice throw here. All right, so this is Aroldis Chapman. He's a Cuban-born baseball player. He actually has the record for fastest pitch ever. It's 105 miles per hour. So he consistently, though, is at 100 to 103, which is pretty amazing. He's a violent torque rotational athlete. I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of energy that he expends. So this actually is a professional baseball coach talking about Chapman and the bullwhip and everything like that. So we're going to get into a little bit of his analysis. I'm going to let him the video play, so he'll be talking about things, and I just want to see, that way you get to see from a different perspective and somebody else talking and kind of giving you their insight on their information.
We're going to talk about how to create massive amounts of speed with the correct pitching mechanics. And we're going to talk about really the only thing that matters when creating a ton of speed. If you want to throw it 90 miles an hour, you want to throw it 100 miles an hour, you want to throw it 105 miles an hour like Aroldis Chapman, this is the only piece that matters to maximizing speed. Everything else you do is to maximize the kinematic sequence, and that's the transfer of energy. We're going to talk about how you can do this properly, some things that you're going to be looking for, and we're going to take a look at Aroldis Chapman, who is the best that I have seen just about of all time, definitely the best I've seen lately at maximizing the kinematic sequence and getting the most speed that you can get, so you can start cracking those barriers of 90, 95, 100 miles an hour and the correct biomechanics to do that. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so when we're talking about the kinematic sequence, really the best representation of this is talking about a bullwhip. And I know it's used a lot. The reason it's used so much is because it's really just a great demonstration of how you can create speed with the transfer of energy. And if we take a look at this person cracking this whip, the first thing you'll notice is as the hand moves forward, it's going to accelerate first. So the hands move from here all the way up here. So it's probably moved a couple of feet. And as this is happening, he's now starting to decelerate his hand a little bit. And you can see that the energy is going from the handle of the whip up through the midsection of the whip here. Now as he continues forward, the hand really isn't going to move much anymore. The hand is going to decelerate, and the energy keeps on transferring. Let's go ahead and go a little farther here. And now you can see that the energy from the middle of the whip has gone through an acceleration phase, and then it starts to decelerate. And then all that's left is the tip of the whip. Now as the tip of the whip cracks, the whip is actually moving over 400 miles an hour, and the crack that you hear is actually a sonic boom. It's breaking the speed of sound. It's creating a shock wave, and you're hearing that crack. The exact same thing happens when we're talking about getting speed and pitching. We accelerate the hips first, just like he did with the hand here. Let's go through this again. So we accelerate. Let's imagine these are the hips. Those are going to accelerate first. Then they start to decelerate. The second piece of the whip here would be the shoulders. It accelerates, and then it begins, so it's accelerating up to here, and then it begins to decelerate. And then the final piece is going to be the arm, which is the tip. It accelerates last, and if we get that sequence right and we can serve the energy the best we can, we're going to pitch with tons of speed. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about how to do this. All right, so now we've seen how the kinematic sequence, how speed, it all comes from a transfer of energy. Energy has to come from somewhere and be transferred to somewhere else, and we want to have this act as a multiplier. We want to maximize every bit of energy that we can get to create tons of speed. And as I mentioned, Aroldis is the best that I've ever watched in slow motion as far as maximizing this kinematic sequence. And we're going to take a look at a couple things here. We're going to go to the top of his loading position here, top of his leg lift, and I'm going to draw a line from the front side of the rubber, so basically on the back side of his foot here. And I really want to pay attention to what the hips are going to do, and we're going to relate this directly to what we just watched the bullwhip do to create massive amounts of speed. He's going to do the exact same thing with his body, just with a slightly different mechanics. So as he starts to stride forward, This is probably one of the most important keys to being able to generate a lot of speed. Now you'll notice that he has, let's go ahead and mark a couple things here. Let's mark his center of gravity. For males, your center of gravity is 2 inches below your waist, roughly, just generally speaking. Females is a little bit lower. So his center of gravity is high here, and as he starts forward, look how his center of gravity is going to start to transfer forward, and now his center of gravity, again, it's in the middle of his body, about 2 inches below the belt. That's where his center of gravity is. So if we take this back line, he's already moved his center of gravity forward about a foot or a foot and a half, and look how closed his hips are. So what he's doing here is he's conserving energy. He's not burning any energy at this point. For those of you who are struggling with speed, you're probably already spinning out a little bit at this point. For those of you who have a lot of speed, you're probably already fairly closed at this point, just like we're seeing with Auraldus. We look at his shoulders, they're facing away from the catcher. The catcher would be able to see the middle of his back here. And if we're looking at his, it would be his right pocket, your left pocket for you right-handed pitchers. That's going to be facing the catcher at this point. So really pay attention to that when you're watching video of yourself pitching. And you'll see that at this point, as he started to transfer forward, this hip is still facing toward the catcher, and that's conserving energy. He's not going to burn any of that energy. We only have so much to use. We want to save it up for later on. And he's going to continue to keep this closed as he goes farther and farther forward. So I want to go ahead and zoom on all the way until his hips are basically perpendicular to home plate. And the camera has moved here a little bit, so let's go ahead and make another line. Now at this point he's transferred, this was his center of mass, center of gravity when we started out. It was about right here at this point. Look how much his center of gravity has lowered and shifted forward. He's about 4 feet from this back line, and look how his hips are still perpendicular to home plate. Now what this means is that he's still saving up this energy. A lot of pitchers, if you watch, almost all pitchers are going to be more open than this. They're burning and wasting energy as they're coming through here, but not Auraldus. He's saving it up. Now from this point, this is when the energy starts to transfer. So from about right here, all the way until the leg hits the lead leg hits the ground, this is when the hips are going to start to fire, and we're going to talk about the kinematic chain. So the hips go first, then the shoulders, and then the arm. Just like we saw with the whip, it starts with the handle and it transfers energy through there. Once the hips have gone and this lead leg hits the ground, this is when we're going to start the deceleration. So the front leg is just slamming into the ground. This is what's called hitting the wall. So at this point, he's going to put tons of pressure into this lead leg, and he's going to first decelerate the hips. Now notice at this point the shoulders are still back. So even though he's used the hips, he's rotated the hips, they're going to be facing home plate, facing the catcher at this point. He hasn't burned the energy from his shoulders. He's still storing that up. Now as he transfers that even more through that chain, now we're going to see next the shoulders are going to go. Now the shoulders are also facing toward home plate. You'll notice here if we look at the hips again, they're still facing their home plate. They've actually decelerated. They're not rotating anymore. They've slammed into that wall. They've braced up by driving into this lead leg, and now they're starting to decelerate. Now the shoulders are starting to decelerate, and the only thing left at this point is the arm. That's the only part that hasn't gone through there. And just like that bullwhip, when it cracked at the end, we're saving all that energy for the last little piece here. And now we can see the hips have fired and decelerated, the shoulders have fired and decelerated, and the last thing to go is going to be this lead arm. And as he comes all the way on through, now the chest or the shoulders, they're basically facing toward home plate. They've rotated a little bit more coming through there. The hips are toward home plate, the arm is toward home plate, and the head is toward home plate. Now everything is released, fully released, the whip is cracked, and you've maximized that kinematic sequence. So let's go ahead and recap on a couple of the key points. This is a very general overview. Let's focus on a couple of key points that you can take to your pitching to start throwing faster and harder, just like we're seeing here with Auraldus. So piece number one, as you're starting your forward momentum, you want to get your weight well forward of the rubber. So this vertical line here is basically the front side of the rubber. You want to get your weight well forward of the rubber and still have your lead hip facing the catcher. He should be looking at your pant pocket at this point. You want to go even farther than this, getting great separation Shoulders are still back.
Hey guys, so in this clip,
So again, there was basically a quick overview on Aroldis Chapman and kind of his hip shoulder separation, what's going on in the pitcher's transformation here. And last clip is really just Max Scherzer. He's another great pitcher as a right-hander, and he has a similar approach style and technique. And I just wanted to kind of show it's kind of got a nice back and forward view, so it's kind of nice just to see this from a different perspective here.
hey guys, so in this clip, you're going to see two angles front and back here of Max Scherzer, just talking about the optimal timing of hip rotation, right? We're not trying to delay the pelvis. We're not trying to delay the hip rotation. The hip rotation is occurring naturally, and this is increasing our authentic hip to shoulder separation.
So now here's a couple baseball pitchers going through their motions. You can see how common this is. You can see this hip shoulder separation there. To follow through. These are all images of 100-mile-per-hour pitches in the major leagues last year. So we're talking about maximum speed. We're talking about over 100-mile-per-hour pitches. Again, opening up just like a volleyball, looking like almost this hip shoulder turn here.
He was a little nervous.
Here's another pitcher. Now he has a lot of left turn, which is not necessarily great, but again, this hip shoulder separation, he rotates a lot. It's just his kind of style. Again, 100 miles per hour on the gun. These are all 100-mile-per-hour pitches. And look how similar the technique is.
Swing and a miss. Runner goes, swing and a...
Again, here, you can just do this over and over again. You can see this kind of angle here. "100 miles per hour." So again, quiet, building off that leg again, like he said. The hips start to rotate. The arms are storing energy, they're quiet. They're loading back, they're quiet. And then this happens so fast, this release right here. If you put it in real time, look how fast this goes from here. From this point, this stored energy, how much kinetic swing and how much energy is released, how quickly this is. Look at this in real time. You can't even see it hardly. But if you slow it down, you can see that how much violently open that chest is frame by frame. And how much that shoulder torque and that arm is just along for the ride.
Peterson, 36.
Here. Next pitcher. Big leg stride again. You can see how quiet they are on the back swing. So just like a volleyball load, look how quiet and then violent. So quiet, then violent. And the head, look at the head not rotating much, except at the end. A lot of baseball pitchers, you're aiming at a downward angle. So unlike volleyball, volleyball you have to play up here and you're hitting up here. But baseball, you're standing, 6.5 feet if you're 6'5", and you're throwing down to about 3 feet off the ground. So that's a little bit different at the end Technique, you can see how this, you have to really follow down because obviously your strike zone is down. But in volleyball, it's a little different because we're aiming up and we're hitting over the head.
And Kelly comes to the plate. Ash is loving this. First pitch out.
You can see a really over rotation here. Really a lot of force going down into the side, overly rotating. Bounces it 5 feet in front of the plate. Good snag, almost, by the catcher.
Save his bullpen for the whole series.
Shallow right field. Catcher's
So good here, open. I think his head moves a little bit too much. I don't, he kind of is really violent with his head a little bit too much.
the 1-1. Deep center field. Kiermaier back on the track.
21-year-old Brewster Gratterall.
This is a very compact delivery here. You don't even notice how fast he's throwing.
Gratterall.
The whip is coming so fast. He's so relaxed. This looks so effortless, this throw.
Brewster Gratterall.
It's probably one of the most effortless looking throws. But you can see how fast from here to here it is. He gets this thing so fast. It looks quiet, and then that shoulder separation hip turn is unreal. And he keeps his head pretty still.
His average fastball velocity in 10 big league appearances. This just jumps out on the hitter.
Depend on a guy. Sometimes you have to trust his makeup.
Before making the major leagues this year. Up comes Encarnacion. Had a 5 years ago. And
These are all over 100-mile-per-hour pitches here. So again, he gets this so, look at this, how quickly this turns. He's so open. His hips are facing forward completely right now. This amount of turn is so fast.
at age 16.
Not the script that they were hoping for.
For those of you keeping track. A drive to right. Rosario had a little bit of... All of them.
Here we go. Cole, this is a player. He actually just signed with the Yankees for, I think, a record almost $200 million. I think it was over $200 million, I believe. He just signed with the Yankees this last season. So we're talking about not only a huge investment, but look at all the people that are going to be around him just to make sure that this guy, his body is functioning correctly. I mean, just think about that, how much of an investment that is just in this guy's body. So again, hip, shoulder separation. It's the name of the game basically in baseball pitchers. Again, drive with the leg, creating back force just like on our approach. We're going to be creating downward force energy into the ground. Then we're taking that force energy, pushing it forward, driving our momentum, loading up our arm quietly while that chain builds up into our legs, into our hips, into our arm, and then snaps forward. Again, rotational athletes, very similar.
Payoff
concept.
pitch, space hit into right field. So the Rays with a 2-out.
15% of the balls hit or line drives.
Trying to see if we can get Aroldis Chapman here. Here's Cole again, the $200-something million man for the Yankees. And you can see somebody's so skinny and how they generate force. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. Here's Chapman. Here's the fastest pitcher of all time here. So let's see it. Let's run him through a little bit. Let's go through his sequencing in just a little bit here. We can see here we go again. Frame by frame, you can see that sequencing going through. Here's Chapman again here. Chapman again here. And we'll end with this last guy here. This is a really quick amount of whip forward there, so you can see how quickly the whip comes through the zone. So again, that's basically what hip shoulder separation, hopefully you kind of got a picture of that. That's what we're talking about. I kind of want to go in depth before we go on any more and really get into our other techniques, but that's kind of what we're referring to, and just showing how all different sports kind of relate and all kind of rotational athletes relate to each other too, and how each sport translates kind of into the same sequencing, and how these chains are basically connected to each other, and how all kind of sports movements with overhead athletes are very really similar. So just wanted to kind of, when we talk about hip shoulder separation, exactly what we're referring to and what we're looking at here. So on to the next.